All right, you ready?
Yeah, whenever you are, man.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another installment of the Chondro Lounge. You got me, Chuck from Chill Chondros, and we have the other host, Lucas, good friend of mine. We have Ryan Young on tonight. I love Ryan. He's got some very specific keeping techniques and opinions, and I think it's an awesome wrench to throw in the works when it comes to the norms that people really talk about on a lot of the episodes. Um, I don't want to talk down upon anyone, but I think that a lot of people say what people want to hear and stick within the ropes when it comes to keeping. And Ryan really steps outside of those ropes. And
I was gonna say, I think that he does things very old school, and he kind of just says things how it is based off of his experience. And yeah, I mean, I'm excited to talk to him. One, because he keeps ambient style like I do, and if there's anybody that I'm gonna take notes on breeding, it's gonna be this guy.
yeah.
Yeah, and I appreciate his bluntness, his honesty. I mean, I love when he talks crap about the designer stuff, and I find it hilarious because I'm mainly a locality guy myself when it comes to any type of animal, so it's really cool.
Yeah, Ryan's not afraid to hurt people's feelings with some of the things that he says, but they're not malicious, and a lot of his beliefs and his keeping techniques and his breeding techniques have been proven. He's a very well-respected breeder. I respect the man a lot, and anytime there's something I'm experiencing that I quite can't figure out from the norms or what you typically hear a lot on podcasts, Ryan just throws a wrench in the works. He'll give you a different opinion, and sometimes that specifically applies to what you're experiencing. So I think he's very important to the Chondro community.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you've earned the right to be an asshole, right? Like when you've bred more python species than anyone else, and you've got the amount of experience. But I say that as a joke because I don't even think he's an asshole. I think he's a great guy. I just think that he has thoughts and ways that he does things, and he has a lot of conviction behind those things. And I don't know, he's just one of those guys that, like, the whole new wave thing, just at least, and again, I don't know if this is true or not, but the way it comes off is like the whole new wave thing. He's like, nah, get out of here.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm excited. You want to bring him on?
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether you've poured your heart and soul into your reptile business or you've just begun your business journey, AE Foundry has you covered with next level expertise in graphic design, motion graphics, videography, photography, and so much more. If you've been dying for a new logo for your reptile business, motion graphics for your current logo, a new website, or need assistance making your video podcast come to life, then listen carefully. AE Foundry's mission places storytelling at its core. AE Foundry believes that a distinctive story and background are the driving forces that set your brand apart. In today's market, consumers seek more than just products. They crave a connection built on trust with the brands they cherish. AE Foundry is committed to empowering small businesses and fostering authenticity that resonates with their consumers. Reach out to them and let them help you craft a visual narrative that helps establish a genuine and lasting connection with your audience. To contact AE Foundry, email them at aromero@aefoundry.com or on Instagram at AE Foundry. All right. Ryan, what's going on, man?
Not much. What are you guys up to?
Recording this episode with you, man.
All right. Well, let's get into it.
Yeah. We did talk quite a bit about you, but, I want to give you the opportunity to kind of like introduce yourself. And I don't know, with your resume, I don't know where you start and where you end, but just kind of, who are you? What do you do? And all that basic stuff.
Just a guy that got into breeding pythons and decided to turn it into a career. I mainly got into it. I was interested in green pythons predominantly. That's what got me into keeping pythons. And then I just met different people along the way, and I kind of got off track and bred a lot of other species. in the meantime. But
It seems like you're still kind of off track, but
yeah, deep down inside, I was a chondro guy to start with. That was the real passionate thing, and then I met other people, and I fell in love with a lot of other pythons, and then I just kind of set a stupid goal for myself, and it took me 20-something years to get there, but I got there.
well, so I'm curious now. I mean, as far as that goal, are you talking about breeding just about every python species?
Yeah, the Dave and Tracy Barker were big influences on me. Not only mentor type, very friendly. They very open with me. I've visited them a few times over the years, and I talked to Tracy quite a bit, even today. But I just kind of was like, man, these people are doing what I dream of doing. And so I think I told Tracy some years ago, I'm like, I want to breed more pythons than you guys did. And she was like, yeah, go for it. Good luck. So, 20-something years later, I was like, wow, shit, I actually did it. But
what was the number?
With that being said, they, I'll never do it in the manner in which they did it. I got nothing but respect for the size of collection and the numbers of species that they would produce, on a year-to-year basis. I'm sitting here nickel and diamond at over 20 years, and she produced a lot of snakes. They're hell of a breeders. So in no way am I trying to say I'm a better breeder than them or anything.
Just a numbers game, right? What was the number to beat?
32 was the bar they set.
Jeez, man.
And what are you at?
35.
Is that including the Apodora Papawata that you have in the incubator, or do you wait until those hatch?
I don't check the box till there's a baby that comes out of the egg.
Okay, that's fair.
I was hoping to get it up close to 40 by the end of the year, but we'll see.
Oh wow. Okay, 8 species. I feel like that's not nickel and diming. I mean, you're like increasing the amount by like a quarter within a year.
Well, I set the new. It was weird after I accomplished that other goal. I was like, well, I was kind of like, I don't know what to do with myself now. And I was like, well, I guess I'll just go back to breeding all chondros or whatever. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to set the bar. I'm going to set a new bar, and I'm shooting for 50.
Oh, geez. So. Okay.
Wow.
50 species, man.
You're going to have to move to Australia.
For real.
No, I think you can do, I think there's 51 species we could potentially get.
And you're counting all, what are you doing? How are you counting green trees? Are you counting all 4 subspecies?
Yeah, they're all 4. Yeah.
Okay.
That makes sense. I got a question for you, since you're kind of like the guy that's, counting the numbers and species. I'm kind of doing something similar, but I'm doing it in the retic world. And every reproducible, like every pair of locality we have in the US, that's my goal. Yeah. I want to produce every retic locality that we possibly can in the US. And then after that, I'm just kind of flipping the retic community off, and I'm keeping a few pets, and that's where I'm going to be. But let me ask you this. So I've hatched ternates, but it came from a Partho clutch. Does that count?
That would count.
Okay, well there you go.
If one baby crawls out of one egg, no matter how you get there, you can't argue with the result.
There you go.
And those eastern retics, they should be a different species at some point.
Without
the Philippines and the ternates cluster with, they're off on their own thing.
Yeah.
The DNA work was done in that paper, and they were clearly their own thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, you can even just physical traits. It's outstanding, the differences between the stuff that's further west and the lesser sun does all that stuff. But
yeah,
well, shoot, let's jump into chondro talk real quick. You mentioned that you kind of made this a career. When did you start keeping and breeding chondros?
I got my first chondro, I think, in 1998.
Okay.
And that was the first, I think that was the first python I ever bought. I'd had a ball python that a pet store gave me when I was a young teenager, because they couldn't get it to eat anything, and I kept it in an old iguana cage and fed it various. It wouldn't eat rats. It would eat anything but a rat, a bird, a mouse, a gerbil, a hamster. It would eat anything. But I kept that thing for a few years, and then I was mostly keeping parrots back then, and so I ended up getting rid of it. But I always wanted a chondro. I had this series of books that was an animal.
You said parrots you were keeping?
Yeah.
Did you just feed all your parrots to the snake? That's how you got into it?
I sold them and stuff and got rid of them. At a certain point, I became more interested in the females of my own species. So
he's feed $9,000 parrots to a snake.
Dude, I grew up with parrots, man. And let me tell you, when you're a kid and don't have a choice and you got some loud ass birds in your house, drives you crazy.
No, I was big into the parrots. For being a young preteen and teenage kid, I had a lot of parrots.
That's funny, man. So, and when was your first clutch of chondros?
2001.
Okay, so literally like 3-4 years after you started keeping.
Yeah, the snake I got. I worked at a pet store, and they had on one of the wholesale lists for a supplier in Seattle. They had a baby for I think it was probably 3 years, and they I'd see it on the ad. Every week we'd get the price list, and I'd see it, and I was like, oh man, that's a lot of money, And finally, after 3 years they had it, they put it like 50% off, and the pet store had no interest in it, and so I convinced the owner of the pet store to let me buy it on her account, and I would go drive to Seattle and pick it up. And so I drove to Seattle and picked it up, and I kept her in a 29-gallon fish tank on my nightstand in my apartment. So
I'm sure you made it work too.
Yeah, no, she did great. She was amazing. I mean, just an absolutely amazing first snake to have.
Chuck, I'm curious if this is like your experience as well, because I know that you bring in a lot of like import stuff, but it took me so long to jump into chondros because I was so scared that like if I looked at it the wrong way, it would get sick and die. But obviously keeping it in a fish tank and it doing well and thriving and chondro or and Chuck with you you work with, I know, a lot of imports, Ryan as well. I mean, do we think we overhype that as far as like their hypersensitivity and because now that I'm keeping them, they're 100 times easier than retics. Like that's even a underestimate. But I literally walk in, I spray maybe twice a week, and feed them once a week, and they shit like once every 2-3 weeks, and it's a breeze.
As long as the husbandry is correct, I don't think that I think they're one of the easiest snakes to keep. They like to die when you breed them, but as far as keeping them, I mean, I have snakes in 4 different rooms in the house right now. God bless my wife for dealing with it. I had some good things sent to me from an importer I'm dealing with, and Ryan actually just benefited from that. Yeah, I got them living in $10 hefty toots. I do have radiant heat panels in all my hefty toots for the quarantine setups, but I got 2 of the imports right now on just Inkbird thermostats. The Inkbirds work really decent for just
and they're
keeping.
Cheap. They're $40.
I don't even think they're that much, man. I mean, I get the ones with the 1/10 of a degree adjustments, and yeah, the snakes are doing great. $4 dog bowls, and I don't even have substrate on any of them. I just keep, if I'm not mistaken, I think David Brahms might run no substrate.
He does that, yeah.
It's just a bare bottom. I mean, and if it is substrate, it's just a paper towel. But no, I think they're very, very easy to keep. I think people, when they kill them, they care them to death. Mm-hmm. It's a big thing. Yeah. You think, especially the imports coming in. A lot of people talk down on imports, but excuse me. I think that the imports can handle a lot more. I think they're a little bit hardier than some of the really deep lineage captive animals.
Ryan's favorite.
Yeah. Yeah, Ryan just picked up a new animal. I'm not going to. I'm not going to put his business out there as to what it is, but it didn't interest me for what I'm aiming for. But I immediately thought of him when I saw this animal. I was like, "Oh my god, dude!" And it didn't turn out to be the sex that he wanted to, unfortunately. But I think
It is what it is. I would have wanted either way.
That
So
animal
what
is
sex is it?
gorgeous.
It's a boy.
It's a boy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say if you were hoping for a boy and you got a girl, I was gonna say, come send it over this way.
No, I was definitely hoping for a female, but I looked at it and I was like, I don't really care. But
Ryan, is that have more phenotypically what you're looking for in that specific type of animal than the one that you already had? Because you just acquired that other animal, if I'm not mistaken, not even a year ago, right?
I've had the other one like almost over a year, not quite 2 years, but I've had it over a year. It was just starting to color change when I got that one.
I'm sure whatever it is, if I had to guess, it's kind of the main topic of the episode. It's probably high white.
Yeah, and actually, when I years ago, I saw a picture of a pulker in Indo, and I was like, oh shit! If I ever see one like that, I'm buying it. And so when I got the photos, I was like, oh yeah, that's a done deal. Take my money.
Man.
And the price was right. The price was definitely
yeah. No,
right.
I mean, listen. It is what it is.
I'm glad you got it. I'm glad you got it because it's going to go to somebody.
I appreciate the heads up. That was an interesting animal. So I was.
How'd it come in body wise, like body condition? Mine came in great. I got a female Jayapura, beautiful blue stripe down the back. I mean, that you guys know that's what I focus on. I want to do like heavy, real nice blue dorsal animals. I don't care what other colors they are, but how did your body condition come in? Mine came in, I mean, very nice.
Better than, I've gotten some better, I've gotten some worse, but I would say a little above average.
Nice. Well, I'm glad it worked out for you. I hope it gets through quarantine for you. And I mean, I hope.
Yeah, he's doing all right. He slammed the first mouse I gave him. So.
Oh, great.
Yes, that's good. That's what I want to hear.
Yeah, I think that I don't know. I mean, I think that when it comes to like their sensitivity, I definitely think it's a lot more hyped up. What's funny is, that's not the first time I've heard Chuck say, until you breed them, then they die. But I mean, I've seen, people that I'm close with and friends, I see females get egg bound and, they'll prolapse their oviduct and they just end up crashing and dying. And, so yeah, it's going to be a fun heartbreak in the future, but if I can even get that far.
It's usually, I don't know. I haven't had a ton of problems. I've lost a couple females like that have a big ovulation and then have like an aneurysm or something. I've had that happen twice in 20 years.
An aneurysm?
Yeah, like their body still like is holding on to the perch, but their head is like dead at the bottom of the cage.
No,
oh,
man.
But their body still like is acting like it's working, but the head's gone. I've had that happen twice.
Okay,
but both times they were not young snakes. They were pretty old snakes. And other than that, I've had one of the first Arus I had. She just, after laying her fifth clutch, she just never really bounced back and just went downhill. But she was 16, I think, so to be expected.
Right.
She didn't owe me anything.
Let's dive into the I want to dive into some like real specifics. So to start it off, I guess, right, tell everyone, I guess what are your normal husbandry techniques? Caging, humidity, heat source, temperatures, all that.
All right. For me, I mean, I couldn't keep them simpler. They're in just, well, I keep them different ways. I have them in tubs. I've got them in Exoterra tanks. I have them in just plastic cages that I've built. I don't own any of the commercially available plastic cages I hear people talking about. So that's, I can't reference those, but
I love the way you say
Dude,
it.
I love it.
The ones I just hear people talking about.
Well,
The fancy ones.
yeah, I mean, most of my cages are probably smaller than most people would keep their snakes. A lot of them are like 12 inches to 15 inches wide, 24 inches deep, 24 inches tall. I run the perches at an angle, and you actually get like almost a 30-inch perch at an angle. So even though the cage is narrow, there's actually as much usable perch space as somebody with a 2 foot by 2 foot cube.
That's actually pretty damn. I never thought of that, but that's genius.
And if you factor in most people have a big heat panel, then that limits the cage anyways. The snake doesn't like that. So, if you got a 30-inch cage and a 12-inch heat panel, you basically have an 18-inch cage, because usually the snake's going to stay as far away from the heat panel as they can get, at least in a heated room like I have. They don't like the that radiant constant.
And what's your ambient in your snake room? Where the chondros are,
I'll just break it out by the season. From January to January to October, it's basically 80, 82 constant day and night. And from October 1st, I basically take October to drop 10 degrees. So then all of October, every week I take a couple degrees off at night. And then all of November, I stayed down at 70 for the low, back to 80, 82 during the day. And then I take the whole month of December going in reverse until January 1st. It's back to 80, 82 constant.
Okay.
And I don't offer supplemental heat during that time.
Yeah, I mean, I keep ambient as well, and kind of the way that my room works is because I've at least in my experience, I've learned with mini splits, like if you want precise temperatures, mini splits or mini split heat pumps are not really the perfect way to go.
Yeah.
And so what I typically do is my days outside of the breeding year, and again, when I say breeding year, I'm talking about my retics, but it'll probably align in the same time with the chondros when it's time. But, I get like nighttime lows, 79, daytime highs, 84. And then, with the retics, I've been dropping down to about 76 during breeding season. But now that I have the chondros, once it's their turn, I'm going to be probably taking it down to 72.
Yeah.
70, 72. I'm just my personal, this is definitely for me that I'm asking this, but me keeping and letting it creep up to 84, right? Once it touches 84, I'll switch the AC on and it kind of will stable out back to 82. But you think going to the 83s, 84, and if it hangs out there, you think that's a little too high, or?
No, not at all. I should have mentioned, the one thing I don't have any control over is my top end.
Okay.
And it gets hot here in the summertime, believe it or not. And my room will routinely get 88 degrees for an ambient temperature.
Oh, okay. Then we're good.
And just for a few hours in the afternoon.
Yeah.
So that's usually like July and August and into September. And about mid-September is when it usually starts creeping back. So in the summertime, my nighttime low would be 80, and then my daytime high is anywhere from 86 to 88. But,
okay.
And that's part of the reason I don't run a lot of basking spots, because I'd just be adding heat to the room.
Right. No, and that makes sense. I my highs can get to 85, and generally speaking, if my high temperatures last for about like 2 hours, then it'll just start to creep back down. Okay, good to know. Speaking about specifics and more about husbandry, are you a sprayer? Do you?
Not typically. If there's one that is sitting there that needs to be active, take a dump or whatever, I'll hit it with a mist just to try to get it moving that night. That usually works, since I don't do it very often. It's a novel experience for them, so they'll usually go.
So
I use it as a tool, like that. I used to think it was pretty important to get them to breed, but over time I realized that's they'll breed without being sprayed, no problem. So
you're not hosing them down like when it's I hose down when a storm system's coming in and the barometric pressures are a little bit lower.
no,
I'll
I
hose
don't do
everybody
that.
down.
You know,
If I have a pair that I'm trying to pair and they're just not doing anything, occasionally I'll spray to see if it does something. I haven't noticed any correlation to it actually working. It's just basically throwing shit against the wall and seeing what sticks.
right. No, I mean, I feel like that's accurate. I was contemplating being, you know, one of the cool fancy new keepers, and I was going to put like a Mist King system in every time it stormed outside, because I have the sensor push systems that read barometric pressure.
Yeah.
And anytime I was going to see and that storm was coming in, I was just going to turn the Mist King on and let it go and see if that did anything. But then I realized I'm a pretty lazy keeper at times. You know, I'll make sure that my snakes are taken care of, but like when I get cages, you know, I want everything for it to come with it. Like I value time more than money, and you know, full-time job, shit ton of retics in my garage, and a wife and child. I don't like spending a lot of extra time playing around with things. So yeah, that's interesting. I feel like I'm getting way less away from spraying. When I first got them, and this is, again, my garage is ambient. I also keep ambient humidity. So my ambient humidity is, you know, 60 to 70%. And at the lowest, it'll be like 50, 55 before the humidifier kicks on. And I was still over here just like, right? And I actually realized that my yellow Biak I had, you know, going through one of the sheds, I started to see weird discoloration on the scales. And so, you know, I hit Patrick up, who I bought the animal from, and Patrick was like, "Are you spraying it daily?" And I was like, "Just about."
Water?
No, I have filtered water, but he's like, "Are you spraying it daily?" I was like, "Yeah, just about." He's like, "Yeah, stop." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I'm just spraying too much. It shed, skin was fine, but you know, very quick lesson to learn, keeping them new.
Was it water blisters?
Yeah, not water blisters. That I think what happened was my excessive spraying while it was in shed gave me the visual representation of like it was separated a lot more because the extra moisture that was on there. Because once it shed, they were gone. They weren't sticking out or anything. It was just kind of discoloration on the side part close to the belly and like the midsection of the body. Weird, but I mean, it was straightforward. And since then, I probably only spray when they're in shed.
Yeah.
So so we got the husbandry down. What sort of feedings are you doing on your adult females? Actually, let's say juveniles. You know, leading up to breeding size, and then also, what are you doing with your full size breeders, male and female?
My young stuff I feed, you know, every basically week to 2 weeks. Just depends on my rodent availability, my time, what I'm doing. If I'm going to be out of town, I won't feed them because I don't want them, you know, making a mess while I'm gone. So sometimes they'll go, you know, weeks. If I'm going to be gone, they're not going to get fed. So and they're fine.
I do the same thing. I don't feed the week before I leave.
Yeah, no, I stop feeding usually 2 weeks before I leave because I want them cleaned up before I go.
Right.
But so I'm all over the place. But I would say if you want to average it out, it's probably every 10 days. Once they start, I mean, if you've raised chondros, there's a point where they kind of slow down. They stop moving around as much. I don't really know like a gram weight. I can't sit here and tell you it's when they're this many grams or whatever, but typically it's when they start eating. For me, it's when they start eating, you know, like bigger weaned mice to, you know, small, medium mice. They get slower, they get more sedentary, and that's when you typically have to be more concerned with feeding them too much. And so then I slow down. Especially if then I usually sex. That's usually when I sex them, and so then it's like I'll figure out who's a boy and who's a girl, and then the feeding will really, you know, the boys it's like maybe once a month, and the girls are, you know, I mean I feed them anywhere from I fed them as close as 3-4 days apart if I have a ton of mice, and I've probably waited 3 months to feed them. Just kind of, it's all over the place. I always, sometimes I joke around that the worst thing that ever happened to a snake was a feeding schedule. So
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer.
I think a lot of their problems, from prolapses to all this stuff, comes from just feeding them too much. They don't have any reason to move because they're actually in the wild. They're an active species. Everybody thinks they're sedentary, and they're not. They move around a lot in the wild. It's captivity that they just sit because they have no reason to move. Food and water is delivered to them, like Uber Eats. There's no reason for them to do anything.
Right. But even at that, I got a camera on my enclosures every single night, man. I see my import pair of Arus that, they're supposed to be, about 3.5, close to 4 years old now. Almost every night. Like, I'm talking about 3-4 hours of just like nonstop.
Yeah, no, that's what they do. It's
insane.
In the wild, they crawl down, go crawl around, look for a place to set up camp, try to catch something to eat, and then they crawl back.
Right.
And they do that over and over and over again without successfully eating probably 90% of the time.
Right.
So.
I've seen that that keeping them correctly, and I feel like I'm keeping them correctly now, is when you do have either lower temperatures or a year-round night drop, some sort of a natural cycle daily, or like you guys keep them 82 ambient, the snakes move around more, especially the females when they are kept cooler rather than hotter.
Yeah,
it's usually a food-based thing for me. If they're hungry enough, they'll move. If they're not, they won't.
Right, and I mean, so again, outside of chondros, but to both of those points, like, I've had to talk about the feeding aspect. People will ask me all the time, like, how often do you feed? And I'm like, I don't know. And they're like, what do you mean you don't know? And I was like, it can be a week, it could be 10 days, it could be a month. I was like, I whenever I see them pacing for like 3 days consecutively, I know they're hungry, and I'm gonna feed them. And then when it comes to, when I made the switch to go into my garage and do ambient, with the natural highs and lows of the day, Chuck, like, spot on. My snakes were moving more. They're believe it or not, my observations, they're digesting and shitting quicker than when they had a hot spot. I don't know why, but
which is like opposite, right? It's opposite of what you would think if you were on a pen and paper in a classroom.
Right. And my whole theory behind like the more movement is it requires energy to thermoregulate. It requires them to have to absorb heat and stay on the hot side. They have to sit there. Or if they're cooling down and building follicles, they have to be on the cool side. Or if they're just hanging out, it's on the cool side. I feel like when you are providing them just the natural highs and lows, they no longer have to expend that energy to choose which one, and they're just, it's a free-for-all. Again, don't know. That is not scientific. That is just my random theory, but they don't require that energy expenditure choosing a side to sit on.
Yeah. I guess staying on the topic, what do you do differently feeding wise in addition to temperatures, which you kind of touched on, but then also maybe lights, whatever? What sort of cycling are you doing to prepare your females and your males to get ready to breed?
Typically, I don't feed a lot in the summertime. I'm usually using those food resources for those younger animals, giving the adults a break. And when the temperature starts dropping in September, before I even start cycling, just from the natural, it's not getting as hot. That's when you start. I can't even go in my snake room without my female chondros just, like nose in the glass. We've all been there with them, but and so that's when they start doing that. That's when I go, okay, I'll start giving you food, and I'll usually. I can't really give you like a. It's probably not quite weekly, but it could, it's probably not more than 2 weeks typically.
So you're cooking with love and not recipe.
Yeah. I just go by what they're telling me. if I walk in the room and they're trying to bite me as I walk by, then I'm like, well, okay, something's going on, and I'll give them an extra,
You're the new breeder's like worst nightmare when it comes to like asking for advice, right? Like, hey, how do I do this? I don't know. My snake just hits the glass. I know it wants to eat, and in 2 months it's gravid, right? Like,
man, I have a real hard time actually when I talk to other people about keeping some stuff, because I'm like, well, most people don't have like dedicated snake rooms, and so that I have had that for a long time. So I have to try to remind myself to like think back to keeping it in a 20-gallon tank in my and realize
72 AC inside the house.
Yeah, so I have to try to remember those days and advise based on that. And like I've probably gotten known for I talk shit about heat panels and stuff, and in those situations, they would probably be a handy tool. In a bigger, for me, the heat panel situation was more like it made too much of my cage unusable. The snakes were actively trying to avoid them, and they're very expensive too. And it was like, man, I got all these heat panels that I don't even turn on. Why do I have them? And so I just opted to stop using them. And
I didn't like them either. I used them for my retics, and when I had my snakes inside my house, and my house dipped during the winter to 69, and we had the AC on at like 72, 73. Heat panels never were consistent because my house temperatures were too low. I had to throw in an oil-filled heater in the room that they were in to do that. And I was like, if I'm going to do this, I'm just going to redo my garage and just do ambient. Like, it didn't make sense. So I've never been a fan. I've always used under tank heating. And I know that's not what you use when you have to provide heat. I'm curious, actually, real quick. I'm jumping back to feeders. You only feed mice?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I guess I would never say only, but I would say 98.5% of the time it's mice.
I like how you're
if there's a female that is like desperately wanting to eat and I don't have a mouse that I feel is even worth giving her, then I'll give her a smaller rat. But I really watch when I give them a rat, I won't feed them again like I would a mouse. If I fed it a mouse and 5 days later she was acting like that again, I would feed her another mouse. But if I did that with a rat, I wouldn't feed her again 5 days later under any circumstance.
Okay. Now when Chuck asked about like cycling, like light cycling or knowing when to start feeding and everything. So for you, I just kind of want to summarize and recap is you're not feeding nearly as often, or barely any during the summer. Once those temperatures start to cool down naturally, you just observe their behavior becoming a little more, I guess, just
the males. Sometimes during the summer, I'll use that as an opportunity to fatten the males up a little bit if they're, if they got pretty skinny over the last breeding season. I'll give them more food. My males don't typically go off food during the breeding season like a lot of people do. Azuria seems to do that more for me than the other species, but they typically eat. It's pretty rare that they won't eat and breed for me. But I will give them a little more food, the males, sometimes in the summertime leading up to the winter.
And so go for it, Chuck.
And I was going to ask because Ryan, you probably be the perfect person to ask, because I have so basically I believe that cycling is you changing something so that the animals do what you want them to do. But my females, like you said, I read them, so I keep night drop year round, and because of that, the females do produce follicles multiple times a year. So when they actually are asking for the food, I will give them a lot more than they typically would get. But it's only because there's day hunting. They're, like you said, they're striking the side of the glass looking for it. And I've been asked before if I cycle, and I don't think that I do. I just kind of read the animals, and I'm giving the females what they're asking for when they're asking for it. Like, other than
I
that,
think everybody cycles whether they realize it or not. You can cycle just, I mean, they can feel things differently than we can. So
Even if
if your temp in your outside is changing the seasons, they'll notice that they can feel those things differently.
yeah,
You might
even if it's
feed,
barometric, right?
yeah, anything like that. And chondros are, I mean, they'll breed year round. They don't.
hmm
They tend to breed more consistently at a consistent time of year if you offer a more abrupt cycle, but they can develop follicles at any time. And I've even with the same cycle I've been doing for 15 years, I'll have a female occasionally that seems to be cycling just out of the blue. And if that's the case, then I'll go with it. I don't like, oh, I'll make you wait. I'm not going to do that.
So that kind of leads me into my next question. Do you have a season, or have you hatched chondros out multiple different months of the year, different seasons?
Yeah, I've hatched them out. I think I've hatched them in October before. So I mean, I've had them all over the place. But I would say most of them cluster breed early in the year for me.
That's the next goal. You know, once you hit 50 species, it's the next goal is to hatch a clutch every month of the year. That's the
Yeah, I'd have to go look at my records to see. I would say the majority of my clutches this year's late. Like I usually I would have, a couple chondro clutches by now, but they're just doing their own thing. It's not.
It's like it's like the jelly of the month club. That's the gift that keeps on giving all year, Clark.
Yeah. So no, I mean the boys. I use the boys' behavior a lot. If I have a male all of a sudden just pacing like crazy out of nowhere in the summertime, then I'll be like, huh, somebody might be doing something. And so
Right,
try to figure out, based on the female's behavior, which female it might be.
right. And I think behaviors definitely look different when you keep in different ways. Before when I was keeping gradient, I knew that, again, I'm referring to another species, but I would notice my females hugging the cold side, right, when they were building follicles. Now that I'm keeping ambient, I'm usually just paying attention to all my males. And obviously I'm looking for follicular swelling and, increased food drive, like you mentioned. But so take us into you've gotten your animals to, you start to pick up their feeding, right? You pick up the females feeding. What's kind of the next sign that you're looking at to start introductions?
I usually just kind of wait till mid-October. And I mean, unless, if I go in there and the males are just going berserk, then if they're acting differently than they normally do, then I'll try to figure out what's going on. But otherwise, if they're all just basically kind of acting normal, I'll start pairing in October, mid-October usually. But I don't expect it. I don't expect like it to mean much. If they lock up or don't lock up, I don't read a lot into it.
You don't post the pictures online.
Chondros are funny. I tend to. I'm actually remarkably superstitious and try to keep shit to myself, which is really difficult in the day and age of social media. So I used to really never speak about anything till it hatched, but and chondros are probably the last vestige of where I still tend to do that. So
we have our outline, and I crossed out the portion that says, "Do you have an ultrasound?" And I wrote in there, "Do you just walk with with a water stick and you just check all your females?"
No. They're pretty good at telling you if something's going on. So.
Chuck,
look.
Chuck, do you use an ultrasound?
No, I got one
Okay.
I got one high-tech piece of equipment, and that's about it. You bust my balls about it all the time.
It's your damn temp gun.
My FLIR thermal imaging camera.
Jeez. It's badass, don't get me wrong.
I think if I had an ultrasound, I think it would scatter my brain. It would give me too many questions.
Right. I'm the same way. I would rather have the uncertainty of just going by observation, by feeling, and by just like kind of learning and knowing, versus going to like a scientific method of using a machine. And then, I feel like, I don't know, if I still can't get chondros to breed using an ultrasound, I'm gonna just throw the towel in, right? Like, I'd rather just take my chances on observations and leave it to that.
I mean, listen, chondros are actually remarkably easy to get eggs out of. It's the egg portion of the, that can be tricky.
So I want to get into that for sure for detail, because that's my biggest concern, is incubation.
Are you getting into that right now? Because I have
no.
Okay, so I got two questions before incubation.
Yeah, I was just saying, like, I want to talk a lot about that, because I'm almost on the verge of just like, I've heard so many freaking horror stories that I'm just like, I'm gonna let the moms just do it. Like, screw it. Like, I'll start with maternal incubation and finish, but I
had shit luck with that, so we'll cover that later. But I have
awesome.
nothing good to say about that.
But before we go into that, when is, so you're doing introductions. Locks don't really mean too much early on in October, and when is it that things start to kind of where you feel like things are going well, when you're starting to see the progression of size build up and all that good stuff?
In a typical year, late December, I usually have a pretty good idea. The early birds, anyways, which ones are going to do something. And then by mid-January, you usually get a couple ovulations by then. But
okay,
let's take it back 2 steps. So, what type of when you get a refusal? About how long would you say after the first meal refusal?
What are we talking about?
From the female refusing a meal after copulation, locks, all that. What are you seeing when you get a meal refusal? What are you expecting next? How many weeks before you're expecting an ovulation? Whatever.
Man, I'm not sure I've ever really paid that close of attention. I would guess it's probably anywhere. I think I've had some that ovulated within days of eating, and I've had other ones, maybe as far as six weeks. I would say most of the time it seems to be a couple weeks to a month, would be my guess.
Have you ever seen
note that portion of the?
Have you ever seen like a reluctant feed, like really didn't want to take it, bit it a couple times, and then they do, and then have you ever seen them like refuse a meal and then maybe take one more before they ovulate after they refused, or do you not?
Usually, if they do that, I don't offer them food again. So, I guess I that's something I wouldn't observe, because I just would figure it wouldn't work.
That's what we heard that in our first episode of the Chondro Lounge. We had Mark on, and he said the same thing. It's once they refuse, he typically is not offering another one. But you know what I feel like I'm going to learn little by little, Chuck? Is like when we talk to the experts, the people that have been doing this for decades, the more vague the answers become and the more questions I'm going to have. But I can appreciate it, because I noticed, like, breeding ticks, I used to take like notes, and when they ate, when they shit, when they shed, when they did this, when they, and now, like, I can go into the notes of my phone where I would log where they eat, and I'll look and be like, shit, I haven't recorded anything for the last like 2-3 months. So you just get away with it, or get away from it. But yeah, man, I'm curious, Chuck, you were talking about ovulation and food refusal. I'm curious, once you see an ovulation, do you set up an egg box?
Me?
Or lay box? Sorry, lay box.
Me or Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, both of you. Go for it. I'm learning here. I'm taking notes.
I'm going to go real quick. I'm totally different than Ryan. I have a Wi-Fi camera on the top of my lay box, and I know the last egg that she laid, and when she puts her head on top of the beehive, I wait an hour, and that's when I know to pull the eggs. Ryan probably, they probably lay inside of an old basketball, And
Not quite like that.
Chuck's literally in his car. There's a shooting on 24th, and he's looking at his female an hour after laying, and he's out. He did not respond. He's like 2 blocks away, and he's like, "Nope, I'm going home."
Lights and sirens all the way home.
Yep.
Yeah,
Oh,
no,
man.
I used to do the I had mixed results over the years of females not laying in their box. They would go sit in it, they would sit in it, and then the night they were supposed to lay, they dump them all over the cage.
Jeez.
And and most of those would hatch, honestly. It was just frustrating. And I just kind of got tired of that. And I think, what was it? It was a couple years ago, I was trying to do maternal, and I was like, I don't think it's going to work that great in their cage. So I thought I would try it in a rack. And it was just so much easier to she had her prelay shed, stick her in a rack, and make the whole tub like a nest box, and she can't dump her eggs because she has nowhere to dump them. She's on the ground. And I had a female that dumped like 3 clutches in a row. And I finally have a picture of her on her eggs now because I put her in a separate tub after her prelay shed. So I don't offer them a box anymore. Once they have their prelay shed, I just stick them right into a rack that I keep like anchovies in.
And what are you putting on the bottom substrate? Just moss?
I'll put some of that cocoa chips, and then I'll put on the back of the tub, I just pile up a bunch of moss. And then I'll sometimes put like a piece of paper over the moss, and they just go lay under that. Noted.
That, again, not the first time, but I haven't heard that many times, but it seems like I'm hearing more people that are just kind of going, they have that prelay shed and they're just putting them in a small rack system. And I mean, it makes sense. Less time to cruise. They're probably a lot more comfortable. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems to have, it's just lessened another, possible hiccups. So just seems to be easier.
You would think a mother would like she's laying, you would think she wouldn't just scatter them because she's eventually going to coil around them, but I don't know what causes it, whether they're not happy. I've had females that were like, I had a female that you couldn't put substrate in her nest box. If you put one piece of moss, she would not go in there. If you put a bare bucket in there, she would go in there. And it was like, man, they're all have their own little quirks. And sometimes it's, hard to figure that out. And I had females that would go sit in their box for 2 weeks, wouldn't come out. And then the night they're going to dump their eggs, they just crawl out and dump them all over the tub or all over the cage. So it's just, something clearly I can only blame myself. I was clearly not giving them something that they were after. User error for sure.
It just, and I think they're struggling in captivity with the wanting to be up in a stick or perch, and being down on the ground. In nature, more than likely, they're laying their eggs on the ground, and they probably have to go find. The research suggests they have to go find like open patches of forest so they get enough heat, for the eggs. And so I think in captivity, they're struggling with the change from going to the closed canopy forest onto the edge of the forest to lay their eggs.
I'm curious. I know, Chuck, you had another question, but you talk about like in, more of an open like forest, for them to get some sun and get some heat for the eggs. I know that with some species, you use supplemental heat for the females only when they are gravid.
All pythons, I give them supplemental heat, even the chondros.
Okay.
Once they ovulate, I offer it to them.
What are you providing?
Depends what they're in. Like a chondro, I just turn on like a 20-watt heat emitter over one end of their cage, and they can go sit under it or not sit under it. They typically, chondros, in my experience, don't usually start really hardcore actively basking until after the prelay shed.
Okay.
But that's a generalization. I've had some that start basking right after ovulation, and I've had some that never basked at all. And So it just kind of depends on the snake.
And then, so when you get the eggs, like how are you discovering them? How often? Yeah, how often are you checking them, the females, when you think they're getting close? Because, like I said, I time it, so I got an hour after her head's on the top of the beehive.
Yeah, no, I'm typically if I think they're going to lay, I have an idea what day, within 3 days before I'll start probably 2 or 3 times a day checking on them.
And how many days is that typically in your experience?
I think it's usually 18 to 21 days.
Post shed.
Yeah, after the pre-lay shed, 50 to 55 days after ovulation.
Okay. And you have some females skipping shed or having like a shed that's kind of off time?
I've had one female that never has had a pre-lay shed.
Whoa.
And she's laid 4 times.
All right. I mean, I've always counted after the prelay shed. I've heard a lot of chondro people. They start counting down from ovulation.
That's the most consistent.
Okay.
The prelay shed can move, but the most consistent is from ovulation to laying. That's usually a tighter one.
I might pay attention to that this year. See if numbers are different.
Yeah, you can use the two together to get it usually down to within a 48-hour period.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very common for the shed to be an inaccurate way of calculating when the female's going to give you eggs in green trees.
I've had females that had a pre-lay shed, like 3 weeks after ovulation, and then they lay like 10 days later. And then I've had females that are like practically in shed when they ovulate, and then they don't lay, they go way past the time you think, and you're freaking out. But when you look from ovulation to lay, it's pretty consistent.
All right, good to know.
What's your fertility rate? Do you have a lot of slugs? Do you not have any slugs?
I mean, I'll never say I don't have any slugs, but I don't seem to get as many as a lot of people I see.
And I'm curious, are majority of the animals that you're breeding, have you now gotten to where you're breeding a lot more of captive bred stuff, or are you still breeding more wild caught import stuff?
I would say I still breed mostly wild stuff. A lot of my babies are starting to breed now, the last couple of years. So that will flip flop here in the next couple of years, and the majority will be snakes I produced here.
I mean, good to know that. I mean, you're still just hammering away with wild caught stuff, and it's the results.
Yeah, I mean,
have been good.
Unfortunately, is what I'm interested in this hobby was really just not available to me. I would have been happy to buy captive bred, locality chondros that just wasn't a thing for the majority of my my career.
Go ahead, say it, because they're all mutts, right?
All hybrid.
Are you seeing a bit of variability with the F2s that you have now that you've produced? Are you seeing any sort of real noticeable difference in clutch sizes from the imports that you're breeding to the captives that you're producing?
Good question.
No.
And what's your typical clutch size?
I usually get anywhere from 8 to 15 eggs.
Okay. And are you supplementing any sort of vitamins or calcium to the males or females?
No.
That's new age people shit, Chuck.
Yeah, I don't dip them in water. I don't dip them in powder. I don't dip them in nothing.
I'm curious now when I got a lot of questions in regards to like your selective breeding and the stuff that you're doing, but I kind of want to save that for our tail end of the show. I want to go on to incubation, right? Because that's the you mentioned it before. That's typically the hard part, maybe outside of getting babies established. And just my observation from the outside looking into the chondro community, because I've wanted them for a while, that's where I see the most heartbreak. I've seen a bunch of people be able to get eggs. It's then getting those eggs to hatch with a decent hatch rate. What are you doing as far as like, what's your incubator? What's your incubator medium? Just kind of without the back and forth questions, just take us into the whole thing.
All right. Well, I'll give you my entire career. What I did when I first got my first chondro clutch, I treated it like every other python, and the eggs hatched fine. Everything was fine, and then I was guilty of following the herd, so to speak. And
Carrying them to death.
Everybody went no substrate. And oh my God, I was like, that's the greatest thing ever. I got to do no substrate. And I've had mixed results the entire time I did no substrate, to the point where I was actually getting so pissed off at it that I decided, I had the sim boxes, I had all the shit, everybody, and I think I only ever had one good 100% hatch in one of those boxes. And I'm not talking shit about the box. It's a fine product. It's not anything to do with that.
It's a great container.
For me, it wasn't working for me. And so I got so desperate for a year. I was like, I'm doing all maternal. And that was a train wreck. and so finally I was like, I think I was probably talking to Tracy or something, and she just was laughing at me. And I said, and I'm like, what? And she goes, it's a fucking python. Just put them back on vermiculite like you used to. And I was like, yeah, no shit. That's what I should do. And so I did. Last year I went back to vermiculite and I hatched them all but one. So I'm back. I'm vermiculating it from here on out. So
you ever use perlite?
Huh?
You ever use perlite?
I'm not sticking egg in perlite. I've done like no substrate over perlite, but
okay.
I don't.
Yeah, I've used most of the people that I see putting their chondro eggs on like directly onto substrate. It's been vermiculite, and I use perlite, and I was just planning on putting them in the perlite, and I'm wondering if there's any difference between the two that others.
I would tell you that honestly, I believe a lot of this is what you're comfortable with.
All right.
Because we fuck things up because we're not, I've had people that are like, oh, I want to do vermiculite. And I'm like, look, if you don't believe in it, don't do it. Because I really genuinely believe a lot of this has to do with how much you believe in it. And if you're doing something that you don't believe in, you're going to screw minor things up that you don't even realize you're screwing up. And so I think you genuinely have to believe in what you're doing and not believe in it because somebody told you to do it. Or not believe in it, believe in it because you've done it, you've been successful, and go, that route. And so if you're comfortable with perlite, I've never used perlite for shit. So to me, that would be like going down a whole rabbit hole. And I'm just like, I've used vermiculite, so I go with the girl I'm comfortable with, I guess. So.
Yeah, for me, perlite, I got it down to a bro science. I fill it up to a certain level, and I literally just take my hose that's attached to the sink and I'm literally just spraying it and clumping it around. And, I typically never have to add water anymore.
I used to just go by feel with the vermiculite. And when I decided to do vermiculite again, I actually wanted to have it perfectly repeatable. So I weigh the vermiculite and the water now for the chondro clutches.
Is it 1-1?
No, I do.
Wait, you measure something out?
Right.
Only for the chondro egg.
Whoa! Stop, everybody, listen.
Because I want to remove all variability. So
if there's any notes that anyone should take is what he's saying. So what's the measurement here?
Well, for me, okay, I don't use little boxes anymore. I think that's I think that was part of my problem. So I use an Iris CD box. It's a long, skinny box. And I put 400 grams of vermiculite and 300 grams of water. And I just mix it up, and that's that. And I mix it up the day she has her pre-lay shit.
Is it in the incubator once you mix it up? Like you're getting it ready at that temperature? And so it's all right. Yeah.
Are you using distilled water or tap water?
Just tap water.
Yeah. I'm using distilled water and now with Orbeez. So distilled water and Orbeez.
I've heard good things about the stupid Orbeez. I've wanted to try it on some Rita clutch, but lately the clutches I've been hatching, they're like first time localities for me. And I haven't wanted to take the risk with it.
Worked great for me.
I was about to use it with these Mindanao Philippines, and I was like, no, I haven't really hatched those before, so I'm not going to try it with these.
My first clutch, I had
Don't experiment on the important stuff.
Right, exactly.
My first clutch, I had an egg that wouldn't. It was just like turn into a raisin. It wouldn't do anything on the sim method, and I put it directly on perlite, and it plumped up better than the rest of them in a hatch, and I still have it.
I think for me, I believe that a lot of the problems I was having, I was getting good clutches. They would go the distance, and it would be DOAs all at the end.
Man.
And I started to notice, like I would cut open the eggs, and you could see where they were trying to cut out. You could see like the scratches under the egg, and I think that the no substrate was just just a titch too dry for me. And so I think being in contact where they can actually absorb moisture from contacting something other than just the air, the eggs seem to just be that much easier for them to cut out and get out.
Once you understand what an egg needs in order to thrive, same thing that all living creatures need. They need, oxygen, they need air, and they need water. And that's why I've always, I know a bunch of people that with their retic eggs, they will, they put their, they'll put a what are those laser trays or whatever on top. And my first question is like, they're retic eggs. Why they're indestructible? Why are you putting a laser thing? But I truly believe, especially perlite, because it's more airous, like there's more oxygen exchange than with perlite. Like just put them in and just kind of wiggle them in, let them get about like a 1/4 inch down into there, and it's got direct contact with moisture, and it's got air exchange.
Yeah, the other thing that I do like about the vermiculite too is you set the egg in it and it's not going to roll around. So if you're handling your tub, moving your tub, your eggs aren't rolling all over the place. So
right.
So to go back to you having bad luck with the no substrate method, what did your incubator chamber look like? Was it wet or was it dry? And then also, what did your egg box look like? Did you have any holes? And what's the gasket? What's the seal on the lid of the sim?
Yeah, when I had better luck doing no substrate, I was using those those early Rubbermaid tubs. I guess they weren't the shoe box. They were, they weren't the big sweater box, but they were the smaller version. I think they were like 12 by 16 or something. Mm-hmm. And I made a PVC, like a 2-inch PVC thing around the bottom, and I set the egg crate on that. And then I had the water underneath. And back then I used like the gasket for like a door at Home Depot, the sticky stuff. And I'd run it around the top, and I'd put a 1/4 inch piece of glass over the top of it. And I actually was real successful with that. Then I started doing all the sim boxes, and that's when the wheels fell off.
When you had that glass, go ahead, Lucas.
What the hell are you guys talking about, a gasket? Like, I've never heard that freaking word until last week when we recorded the first episode, and now I'm hearing it. What are we talking about? Gasket? Are you talking about just like airtight, like sealing it?
Oh yeah.
It wasn't airtight. Like, at the corners, obviously it was not. It's not a perfect thing. So there was always some air.
But that's what we're talking about with the gasket. It's just airtight.
Yeah, you're trying to limit the air exchange.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Because I just use weathertight totes, right? Like they come with the gasket. They have the seal in there, so maybe that's why I'm ignorant about. I've never heard that.
Yeah, well, it depends. I used to cook everything in like a small incubator that was like a refrigerator. And I used a lot of fans, and so those fans can dry things out. So then, I'm trying to limit the air holes in that type of setup. So you kind of have to balance all of your parameters. If you have a high wind, low humidity incubator, then you've got to be way more concerned with not having too much ventilation. If you've got high wind, higher humidity, you can be a little more free with your ventilation. So you really have to. I mean, it's all it's all over the place. I've done it every way you possibly could do it.
So
But
what is your ventilation? Are there holes? Are you opening up holes as you get past day 40?
well, last year, this is the first year in the incubator I'm using now. If I could do chondros this year, this will be the first year I've done it in this incubator. So based on what I saw with other snakes, this incubator runs way more humid than my last one. And so my last one, I had no ventilation. Just those iris tubs, they would snap shut, but they're far from airtight. There's no gasket, there's no nothing. And that worked great. In this incubator, I'll probably put one hole on each side of the tub, and that'll be done.
And is that with a wet chamber?
Wet chamber. I'm
Like, do you have a water pan in the chamber of the incubator, or is it a dry chamber?
Yeah. I've always done that. The last walk-in incubator I had a big ceiling fan, but it was drywall and fiberglass insulated.
Mhm.
So the air would, it wasn't very airtight. Let's put it that way. The new incubator is all spray foam and PVC wall panels, and the humidity. I mean, like my old incubator, I would have to fill the water, probably every like 5 to 10 days, and this one it's like twice a year. So it's really good.
Lucas is just flabbergasted.
No. Excuse my ignorance. When I set up my egg boxes, I've put a sensor push system in there.
While you're talking, do you want me to go get my egg box that I incubate with the gasket?
Go for it, please,
and explain it.
No, whatever. Anyways, I'm confused, right? Because the highest level of humidity that we can get is 100, right?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't go above that. I have never used a water chamber or, had open water inside my incubator. I might use, water bottles that are closed just to create more mass so that the
thermal mass. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. But when I use my perlite and I have a sensor push system in there, and we're talking about 90 days with retics, my humidity never falls below 99. So I'm confused how people's egg boxes, like why people are adding more so that the inside of it is humid when the egg box itself, for me, stays 100% humidity the entire time.
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea what the humidity inside mine is doing. So I just
because like my incubator, on the inside of my incubator, humidity will fluctuate between 50, it'll fluctuate my room temperature, right? 50 to 70. But my egg boxes are always like, they don't budge. So I've never understood why water is sitting open. And Chuck, maybe, you can answer that question too. My question was why is water standing on it, like open inside the incubator when the humidity inside the egg box is 100%?
So what I have found in my very limited incubations out of 2 is when you have an egg box that's completely sealed, you don't have any air exchange, and you're susceptible to mold growth, stagnant air, all that stuff. So this past incubation, I opened up some holes for ventilation. However, the eggs can dry out while you're trying to experiment with a new egg box design if you don't have a supplemental humidity on the outside. And you can see that when you have a dry chambered incubator with no water pan and open holes on your egg box, it will dry out much quicker, have a lower humidity than if you have a water pan in the incubator. It's almost like the humidity in the chamber acts as an insulator to keep the humidity inside of that egg box. It doesn't want to escape and go because there's humidity holding the humidity in, if that makes any sense.
No, that makes 100% sense. I use, my boxes have 2 holes on opposite corners. And again, I've never had my egg box humidity at less than 100% in a 90-day period. And I'm just guessing that maybe the chondro eggs are a lot more sensitive to the air exchange if the air exchange is not humid enough. I guess that's what it's got to be.
So this is a Cambro 1/2. This is my incubation box, right? This is the seal is literally, it's tough. Like you got to use 2 hands to open it. But when you don't have air escaping out of the lid and it's a little bit lower and you have ventilation holes like these tiny little holes right here, what happens is it's almost like the humidity goes up to the lid and stops and stays rather than just escaping. So when you have air ventilation holes on the bottom, you get a condensation that forms on the lid, and the humidity seems to be higher in the boxes that have lower ventilation holes.
Okay. So
I don't know why.
You don't want condensation on the lid, right? Not with chondro eggs.
Yeah. So I personally like when the condensation's a mist, like when you just get out of the shower, it's on the mirror. If you have that up the sides, even the droplets up the sides, but then you have a light mist on the top of the lid, that's an acceptable amount of humidity in the egg box. Because no matter if you have sensor push, Govies, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, they all fail. Once it gets to 99.9% humidity or 100% humidity, they go wacky on you. And even when you get, 98% humidity, they don't have accurate readings. They act funny as hell once the humidity is too high in the egg box. So you don't have like an accurate reading inside the box per se. So
Okay,
when you have, go ahead, Ron.
The problem with using condensation to judge all of that is that condensation is actually just telling you that your egg box is hotter than your incubator. That's what causes condensation.
That's a good way to put it. And, I feel like
You're not wrong.
Yeah, and I was going to say, at times your egg boxes, when eggs are further in development during that last, I don't know, X amount of weeks or whatever, they're kind of developing quicker. That temperature does rise. So I guess what you're trying to do is stabilize the temperature in the egg box.
Yeah, condensation is, I hear a lot of people talk about condensation. Condensation is just telling you that your egg chamber is hotter than your incubator temperature.
Which means you need to ventilate more.
Not necessarily. You can let it ride. Chondros, you just can't have them get water dripping on them. That's usually a death sentence.
That's my biggest fear, because right now in my boxes, in my incubator, they get a shit ton of condensation on the top, and as soon as I take the latch off and I open it, it all falls on my retic eggs, and I don't give a shit about it. They're, my retic, like I don't even dry my retic eggs. Like I just let them be. They ride the wave. They're fine. But with chondro eggs, like if I use the same incubation method I do with my retics, they're all gonna die, every single one.
Well, the big thing is, you can do. There's things you can do. You can tilt your egg box so the water runs off the lid. For me personally, I think the biggest thing to help you is just use a bigger egg container, and you're not going to get as much condensation because it's the bigger the container, the harder it is for those eggs to affect its temperature.
I got a really, really wacky experiment that I ran that worked for me, and I want you guys to both answer this. Ready? When you've had an egg box in the incubator with another egg box on top, have you ever noticed that wherever the egg box on top contacted the egg box's lid that's on the bottom, you get no condensation whatsoever?
That's happened with my retic eggs.
So what I did,
it's thermally stable.
So what I did was I took a vacuum sealer and I made a bag of water. And I made the bag of water hotter than the egg box by putting it in the hottest part of the incubator. And you got to make sure the egg box doesn't have condensation already. And as long as it's cooler when you put it into the incubator. You take that bag of water and put it on top of the lid of the egg box, and it will inhibit the growth of condensation on the egg box itself, because it's just like stacking another egg box on top.
Yeah, that's all. Scientifically, what you're doing is you're just making a thermally stable lid that doesn't have the thin nature of a tub. Is just like when you put a cold glass in your house and it gets condensation on it. And that's because the warmer air passes across the cold surface, and the grains of water shed out of the air because you've reached dew point, is the technical term for that. And so you're just making it to where your tub lid cannot reach dew point, is what you're doing.
I mean, I don't know how the hell you came up with that, Chuck, unless you looked into the science behind it, but I don't know. I think it's pretty...
I'm a redneck. I grew up poor.
The other thing you can do is you can get the scuba diving mask stuff, and you can put it on your lid and you won't get condensation.
What do you do to prevent condensation? Let me just put it.
I use a bigger egg container.
Okay. Bigger egg container, and you don't deal with condensation?
I didn't last year, no. And I haven't had any issues since a bigger container. And other than that, I would usually just back in the day when I was using the glass, I would just use the mask stuff for scuba diving. And then in the shelves in my incubator now, I just have a 1/4 inch a foot drop from the front of the shelf to the back. So even if I had condensation, it would just run off of the tub.
Okay. I want to speed this along because we still got to establish Neos, and I want to talk about the high white project that you're working with. And I feel like if we don't have the time to really do this, project that you're working with justice, we can always have you back on and really focus in on some of that stuff and maybe the locality stuff as well. But, I don't know, what is it? 52 days, 55 days? What is the number that these snakes take to hatch typically?
It depends on the temperature you cook them, but it's usually 50 to 54 days.
Okay. So they hatch, are you taking them out one by one as they go, or do you have purchase set up in the box? And then after that, kind of take us into, what you're setting them in, what the substrate is, and when you start feeding trials, and kind of like your methods that have worked for you with your feeding trials.
I typically, now that I'm using vermiculite again, when they start to pip, I'll take them off the vermiculite and put just a saturated paper towel. And then I set the eggs on like a deli cup lid on the wet paper towel. So the babies, if they crawl out, they're not getting covered in vermiculite. So I started doing that because washing them is kind of a pain in the ass. But I'll usually pull them as they hatch. I've put perches in there. If there's a bunch that I think are going to come out overnight, I'll put a perch in there or something for them to sit on. And I usually just take like a piece of Romex wire for your house, like housing wiring, and you can just kind of bend whatever kind of perch you want. And just, you'll come in the next morning and they'll just be lined up on that. Typically.
Do you cut?
Do I cut eggs? Mm-hmm. Yeah. When the first baby pips, then I pip the rest.
That's great. So, I mean, I do the same with my retics, but I saw chondro eggs in person for the first time at Bill's place during Dallas NARBC. I wouldn't dare cut those things. Those things are smaller than testicles, dude.
What
do you guys cut them with?
Cuticle scissors.
Mm-hmm. Jeez. Like, I saw them and I was like, no shit. Like, these are python eggs?
Yeah, I don't butcher them. I don't hack the top off of them. I usually just do what I call venting. I just put a little hole that's enough that they can't suffocate.
Okay.
But it's not big enough that they can come out either.
Okay. Random question. Are they bigger than Antaresia eggs?
No.
Yeah,
Thanks.
see, that's dumb. Like,
you basically can't. You couldn't tell a children's python egg from a green python egg if you were there sitting next to each other.
That's insane. I feel like the smallest python should have the smallest eggs, but I guess
pygmy pythons do have smaller eggs.
Okay, fair.
Yeah, pygmy python eggs are a third the size of a chondro egg.
Okay. Oh wow. All right. All right. So you got them set up. Well, and you're. I'm assuming you're putting them in shoebox.
Yeah, I
Set
put them
up.
in Cambro quarter pans, 4-inch tall quarter pans, and then I use the David Brahms perches.
Cool. And over water, over paper towel. You said
paper towel.
okay.
Saturated in water or dry?
I usually keep them dry until they're in shed, and when I think they're within a day of being in shed, then I'll saturate it.
All right, well, then back up. How do you keep them from hatch to first shed?
Just like that. I usually, my room is pretty humid, but I keep them. I'll usually give them like a real light mist, on the paper towel. But I don't hose them down. That's when you get the water blisters on hatchlings. You keep them too humid, but you have to have the humidity right when they go to shed. It's basically but you can screw it up early if you give them too much humidity early. So you kind of have to watch it.
Okay. So golden ticket is the moment you kind of see that opaque color, like that pinkish purple start to come through reds. And I still, again, it's only been probably 6 months, but I still struggle to identify when my yellow Beox in shed. Yeah.
They can be tough sometimes to tell.
Yeah. All right. Last portion of the breeding aspect and arguably the hardest part. Want to know your experience with getting these babies established and diving into just, tips and methods and things that you've done that worked for establishing hard to those babies.
Other than Kofiau babies, those things are a whole level of hell that we don't even need to discuss. But the rest of them, I haven't found them to be real. I mean, most of them come around with just tease feeding, frozen thawed or pre-killed, mice pinkies. I've only force fed or assist fed, whatever you want to call it, very few babies. I'm kind of the mindset that we're in the process of domesticating these things to some extent, and if we constantly save the shitty animals that don't want to adapt to captivity, they're just going to go on to make more shitty animals that don't adapt to captivity. So I've been known to be a little more brutal on that than a lot of people. But I don't. That being said, I don't lose very many usually. And last year was the first year I had any success with the chick down shit people have been talking about for 20 years. That never did anything for me.
You just tried chick down for the first time?
Well, I know I've tried it over the years. It just never did anything. And then finally with the Num4 babies I had last year, I was really surprised because I'm like, oh, they're meaner and shit. Like they'll be easy to go. And they were kind of a pain in the ass. They didn't eat as easily as I expected. And so I was like, fine, I'll give it a whirl. I'll try the chick down. And sure as shit, it worked for them, but it's not up until last year. It had never worked for me at all. So
that's crazy.
I hear everybody talk about. I don't even bother to try until without the chick down. And I'm like, that's a myth.
Ryan's like that stubborn old man that sent his soup back to the kitchen at a diner.
So I've one trick that I did with Aunt Teresa that I had worked for a couple chondros is you catch a western skink or something, pop its tail off, and then you can rub that on a pinky and that'll work occasionally to get them to eat.
Okay.
But usually you don't have to resort to that. I really have not found the vast majority of them will eventually start eating tease feeding them. But I also don't freak out if they don't eat like a lot of people. So
like me.
That's because you're not producing, those high end mutts that are
I guess
worth lots of money. Also because you freaking hold back all your damn animals and you don't let any go, man.
I'm still building what I want, and man, I can't even tell you the level of pissed off I'd be if I sold the best looking baby. And I've had enough of them now. It's really hard to judge when they
Yeah.
hatch, who's the best looking baby. Because I've
No,
had ones that I thought this isn't going to be good looking, and it ends up being the best one. So I'm just like, I'm done with it. I don't sell them until I know what they're going to look like.
yeah, I mean, we talked about trying to strike a deal, and I was gonna sweeten it up as nice as I could possibly sweeten it up when we were talking about trading and for some Saputria, and I was like, damn, this guy's serious. Like, he's really not giving up any of these animals.
Yeah, I don't come off of them very, very easily.
But I will say that taught me a lot in the sense of, like, you're absolutely right, and I have something to consider, especially with locality stuff I'm breeding, but even with the few designer projects that I'm going to have as well. I as again, coming from the retic world, as minimal space as these snakes require versus a reticulated python, like, to sit on babies for a year is a walk in the park. Like, it's sitting on them for 18 months is a walk in the park, right?
Yeah, it's usually over 2 years for me.
Yeah, I feel like that's fair.
I want to be able to sex them. I want to be able to really know what they're going to look like, and then I can make the hard cuts then. So.
Let's talk about I'm really fascinated with you doing your best to selectively breed for high whites. Are you doing that just with the Aru stuff right now?
No, that's the num 4s I got because they tend to be more high white, and so I'm going to play with doing it with Azuria. I guess I'm kind of going that way with all 4 of them at this point. Okay. But the only one that I've made significant progress with is the Arus.
Okay. And what's your observation? Because for the longest time, you hear a lot of people talking about, it's something they're getting in the wild. It's the UV. It's their diet. It's, I don't know, the trees they're perching, whatever. Right. I time and time again, you constantly hear people dismiss the idea of selectively breeding for white. And for me, Arus have always been my favorite locality. I've always enjoyed a high white. I'll say a high white chondro in general is my favorite. I'll take that over a black, blue, green, purple, pink. I was very quick to just kind of hear those rumors and, kind of dismiss the idea that I could possibly do that. But the work that you're doing seems to kind of prove otherwise. It takes a long time, but.
Yeah, I was, when I came into the hobby, the snakes that I would just gravitate to were the snakes with the white speckles. And, I bought into it. All the people telling me, oh, you can't make them, you can't make them. And for years I just saw, oh, well, you just can't make them. And then I don't know what happened. I probably was paying attention to like carpet pythons or something. And I was like, these black and yellow jungle carpet pythons don't look anything like a wild jungle carpet python.
Right.
And so I thought, and so then I really took a deep dive into like, who has actually done what? Where are these opinions coming from? And it was like 2 or 3 breedings. They would keep one baby in the clutch. All the other babies would disappear into the ether. Who knows how any of them turned out. A lot of people didn't even post pictures ever again later on the internet. And I just realized that their opinion was not really based on a sample set that I thought was, worthy of having that opinion. And then the other observation is I've looked at literally hundreds of imported Arus, and the vast majority of imported Arus would not be snakes you would call high white. It's probably less than 30% of them that I've seen over the years that the average keeper would say that's a high white animal. And it's really, when you're really getting into those ones that you see, the token Aru that you see on a poster, the really extreme, just off the chart animal. That's like a freaking 1 in 500 animal. That's not that is not what an Aru chondro. That the definition. I think the problem with a lot of people is their idea of what an Aru chondro is doesn't match the overall typical phenotype.
it's skewed off of like the one or two pictures they've seen, right?
Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
those high white animals, and you want to know what kind of like busted that whole theory for me about like it being from a wild thing. The high whites is I started realizing I started seeing that people were making crosses, right? They were making the Arubiox,
Yeah.
and you would see those crosses, and by F2 F3 there was a shit ton of white. And I was like, if we can replicate it by doing those crosses, then clearly we can, maybe the Biok might be helping a little bit, right? And but whatever's going on. But, I thought that if an Aru Biok cross by F2, F3 can have a high white animal, there's no way that if you selectively breed a high white Aru, that you're not going to get there in 3 generations either.
Yeah, and a lot of things that you would see over the years too is like somebody would have an exceptional chondro or an exceptional Aru, and they would breed it to, an average one. And it's like, well, if you know the basics of genetics, you're going to get the average. That's what the majority of them are going to be. And so you had situations where most people didn't keep all their babies. So you never really knew how all the clutch turned out. They would keep 1 or 2 that they thought was going to be the best animal. And so then they would base their opinion on, well, it didn't turn out like it wasn't as good as, the most exceptional chondro anybody'd ever seen. It's like, well, you can't expect that. That's just unreasonable to expect that. And we don't really know how many genes are involved to make an animal express white. It's clearly not like a single gene situation. And so, and Aru is also a huge island chain. They're not all coming from the same place. So genetically, what makes this Aru high white and what makes this other one high white, they could be slightly different things. And bred together, if those genes don't line up perfectly, they're not going to express that in their offspring. So years ago, I had the opportunity to get a pair of Chris Ruley's Arus, and he had bred some pretty, both animals were well above average. And I was like, okay, these are, they're not going to be that much to look at. And they weren't. They were they were above average for what was considered good for a captive bred back then, but nobody would look at them now and call them high white. And I thought to myself, the key to this is their babies are going to be where it's at. And that was totally proved out.
I've heard the whole like skip a generation thing. Is that what you're saying? Like, not those babies, but
you're not really skipping a generation. You're locking in the phenotype in those. You're getting all the genes lined up on both sides of the snakes. So you have to just breed those closely related animals that'll have the same genetic combination as their.
Yeah, so you're breeding direct siblings too.
Yeah, right. So to dumb it down, it kind of working like a simple recessive in a way.
Sort of, yeah. But you still got in the F2s. I had the first clutch. I think there was like 12 babies, and 2 of them were like right at the parents' level, and 5 of them were well above the parents' level, and like 4 of them were fucking like almost or better than the original wild ones.
Okay.
So it just, and I'm trying, I hope soon that I'll be
breeding release some of them
and see what happens. So. What was that?
I said that you'll release some of them. You hope
I actually did. I sold all but 4 of those.
Oh, shut up, dude.
But that was back in, 2000 or something.
Oh, okay.
So I kept them all and raised them all, and I kept the best 2.2, and I sold.
Okay.
Well, I don't know if I kept the best. I kept what I thought. Some of the animals I sold, phenomenal snakes.
Yeah, I know some people it doesn't bother them to get rid of and sell the great stuff, and some people eats them away.
I think when I get to where I'm at, or get to where I want to be at, then I won't care anymore.
Fair.
Because I think there is. I don't think it's going to turn into the emerald thing where, like, I don't know if it. I think there's a finite ability of what you can do. And honestly, I don't know that I want it to exceed what is phenotypically possible in the wild. If it starts doing that, if it gets so much white that it's just like not natural, then I'll probably lose interest.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it just going based off of what you work with, it's all about just the locality stuff.
Then they're just designer mutts.
Right. Then,
Yeah, I mean, at a certain point, if
you've
they're
gone too far.
Then it's just good. Yeah, it might be an experiment that's gone off the rails.
Jeez, man.
I feel you on that. I feel you on that.
I mean, you know, the sad part is I genuinely think that chondros are, you know, just exceptional snakes. Beautiful as Mother Nature intended them. Multiple flavors. You know, there's something for everybody. I don't know that. I think it could go too far, and then at a certain point, it's like, I mean, I really wouldn't be any different than breeding a ball python at that point. So, if you don't want a snake that looks like it's supposed to look in nature, then I question your love of the species to start with.
You know,
oh my God, shots fired.
No, I mean, I learned about, you know, that was a very direct way of saying it. I got that about you when we were talking about the Saputri I said I'm sending out to you. And, you know, I asked you if you wanted me to send pictures, and you said, send me 1.1 that looks like how they do in the wild. And I was like, okay. Like,
I didn't care about, if you pulled it off a tree, that's what I wanted to look like.
Right. Like, no, that's exactly what you said. And then I sent you a picture of the two I'm sending you, and I was like, you know, these are the two that I'm thinking of. And you're like, yeah, cool. You don't got to send pictures. We're good. I was like, all right, like, this is
I was just trying to save you time. I'm like the easiest customer on earth.
I loved it.
I was like, man, you know, I know how customers are. So, you know, you don't have to nurse me. We made the deal. That was it. Good to go. When they show up, I'll look at them. That's good enough. So, man, you know, I was just trying to save you the hassle.
No, for sure. I'm also I'm sending snakes out to Ryan Young. I'm wanting to make sure that you're going to be okay with the snakes I'm sending you out.
Oh yeah, no, I'm okay with it. I mean, I do look for exceptional stuff, but a lot of things you know, and I love morphs too. I'm all over the place. I understand why people are drawn to morphs. I totally get it. It's just for chondros, I don't know. To me, that's just a bridge too far. It's like, that's just such a cool snake anyways. It's like having an albino scrub python. Like, a scrub python's a fucking phenomenal snake. An albino's not going to make it better.
Yeah.
Man, I gotta agree with him.
I mean, no, I'm right there. You guys know, I've talked about it plenty. Locality is my jam.
We didn't even talk about this.
What?
But go ahead. No, finish what you're going to say, because we didn't even talk about this. We have Ryan Young, and we didn't even touch on the most important aspect.
All right. So, I mean, if you want to dive in, I'm okay with it. But I was just saying, like, locality has always been my jam. And I've always told people the same thing. Like, when I fell in love with chondros, it was a green snake with some white speckles and maybe a blue underside that, you know, I saw in probably Snakes magazine back in the day. And you know, the designer stuff, it fascinates me only because of the OCC is insane, and I think that it's fun, right? But there's just nothing that beats you know, an Aru with white, or a Maniquori or Jayapura with the beautiful blue stripe down that back. I mean, they really do come in, or even Beox, man, with the crazy ass yellows and the blacks that they get. Like, you can have designer and locality shit with Beox, so.
I mean, that's, if you look at the history of like people posting pictures of chondros breeding, and man, it would just kill me. I would see just some of the most phenomenal locality examples breed into a mutt, and it's like, you realize the better snake is the fucking locality snake. Like, that perfectly striped Maruki blows away that fucking shitbag mutt that's breeding with it. I don't know. Like, there's a reason why the mutt guy was like, oh fuck, look at that thing. Because it blows away, you know, and it's like, but then you're ruining what it is. Like, I don't understand that mindset of, like, a good example would be, I hate myself that I even know, you know, this name, but that, what did they call him? Arctic Blue or something, that Cyclops that came in. And it's like, that thing, I don't know that it ever got bred to a fucking cyclops. Like, why? If you were trying to make that snake, why did you breed it to every fucking thing on Earth other than what it is? Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you like that phenotype and you're trying to bring that out, why didn't you breed it to what it is supposed to be? You probably could have gotten there quicker. But no, I saw that thing breeding Marukis. I saw that thing breeding well, what did you think that was going to do? Really? Like a fucking Viridis, a yellow snake that with very little pattern? Like, come on, man.
I will say that blue cyclops, if that would have been used to maintain and propagate cyclops, we would probably have hundreds of blue cyclops right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think I heard that they had bred it to a Uterensis, but I just, I don't know. I never saw it. So I just remember seeing pictures of it breeding one of the most perfect Marukis I'd ever seen, and it was just made me want to fucking hang myself. Just like, fuck. Because both animals were phenomenal, but for different reasons, and I don't know I'm not sure how you thought that putting those two together was going to somehow create something better than either of them for the reasons that either of them were good. I just boggles my mind.
Chuck, we got time to jump in?
Dude, I think you guys touched on it. The best looking green tree, in my opinion, is a very exceptional adult with a heavy blue dorsal stripe going down the back. That was a yellow neonate.
Yeah.
No, I mean, man, that was my first chondro. Nice.
A Pulcher or Uterensis.
Yeah.
Jayas and Maniquaris just with that heavy blue dorsal just did that cyan because the yellows have such a more intense blue.
Yeah, man.
Typically, more commonly. I mean, there's extreme examples of reds, but
you can go super extreme with reds and they'll look crazy. And I think the reason why people really like those over yellows is because they're outliers. They look different, right? And it catches your eye. But I don't care, man. Like there is nothing better.
The vast majority, though, of mutt reds end up to be, and I don't want to disparage any green python because a green python's a green python, but man, you get just some butt ass ugly, solid green, no pattern, no nothing.
Yeah, it takes 12 years to get there, but they get there.
You had a cool 4-year run to get there, 5-year run, but it's like you're gonna look at that snake for 10 more years. I don't know.
Yeah, I personally think nothing beats that electric yellow with that solid dorsal stripe as a neo. This is
purely a thing we've created on our sector of the hobby, because if you go to a reptile show where there's people that don't know anything about which one's more valuable, and there's a red baby and a yellow baby sitting there, they freak out over the yellow baby, and they barely notice the red baby.
Yeah, absolutely.
Correct.
So the regular folk think the yellow baby is more extreme, and better, and so does Mother Nature,
right?
Because it's clearly trying to purge itself of those evil red babies.
MJ's gonna have beef with us because we're bringing up this debate on a different Chondro podcast. He's gonna be like, "What the hell are you guys doing?" But no, I mean, it's not even a debate because I think within us three. And I don't want to sound like a hypocrite. I like I do like the designer stuff, but just where my heart is, like if someone told me that you can only keep one chondro, it would be an Aru or some highland locality.
Yeah, I have kind of taken up the mantle of talking shit about red babies. But I do love red babies. I have no problems with them. They can be phenomenal adults. It's not but it bothers me that there's a huge sector of the hobby that, they laugh and joke about, oh, I produced this shitty yellow baby. Like it's, not even worth their time. And it's like, man, that is just, to get to that point, I don't know. I question your...
I hope it's still fun and games, right? I
think most of them do. It's mostly tongue in cheek, but they're trying. They are actively trying to not have yellow snakes, though. So,
right. One thing that I can appreciate is, Mark Mark Hager just produced a clutch of designer animals, but he was disappointed. He was heartbroken that the male ended up being a dominant red, and the whole clutch was red. He didn't have any yellows that he could hold back from the clutch. And I was like, damn, out of all people for that to happen to, like, poor freaking guy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm at a crossroads. Everybody wants the red Manox, and if I want to do the yellow or the white project, it's not going to be the red's not the way to go for that. Right. And I'm going to have to actively choose to not use, arguably one of the most phenomenal snakes that I've ever had, my red Manox male, and breed these girls to these crazy high white yellow boys, and just know, and I'm gonna have to choose, like, market over heart,
right?
What's more marketable, and I'll do it, but it will be a painful choice.
I will say, I feel like with your presence in the chondro community, that I don't know if that much marketing or what the market has to do. I think if you make animals available, they're going to be purchased. I tried getting.
Yeah, well, the reality for me with the chondros, I do what I do for me, and
right.
If people want to buy them at the end of the day, I guess that's a benefit. But I'm not going to steer my. I'd be breeding mutts if I was doing it for strictly, the money. Because the easiest clutch I ever sold was, years ago, I made a Biok Uterensis cross, and I was disgusted how easy those babies were to sell for so much more money than any chondro I'd ever produced. I was like, this is fucking stupid. People liked them, and I was just like, oh, and I never made them again because it was, wasn't my thing. So I'll choose to do what I'm going to do for me, and hopefully there's people that want the babies, but I'm not going to do it based on that.
Right. I mean, clearly I tried getting you to freaking give me one. It didn't work. So, I think on that positive note, just talking about doing it for you and nothing else, we can wrap up. But I do have one wrap up question, and it should be a quick, easy question. But Chuck, do you have any other final question before you want to ask Ryan?
No. Well, you want your wrap up to be last?
It doesn't matter.
I'll go first then. Where do you see the green tree python community in 5 years?
I think it's kind of been the same basically the entire time I've been in it. It's people treat it like it's on a different level. Whether it should be or not, I guess that could be argued at another day. People come in, people get out, people have good experiences, people have bad experiences. And it'll weed out the lifers from the fly-by-night guys. And it's always going to be fairly stable, just based on it's a little more difficult. And like we touched on, the babies are easy to hold on to. You're not desperate to move them. So I think it's always going to be a good thing. But I never sit around and worry too much about what the market's going to be, because I mean, you produce the snakes and figure it out later.
Yeah. It's also nice that you're spending a few $100 on imports instead of $6,000 on a designer.
Nah, dude, I've dropped thousands on imports. So.
Oh, I bet. I do. That's one thing I can't appreciate about the chondro market, at least in the community, is that they're not, you can beat a retic up and abuse it and neglect it, and it'll still give you a clutch. You can't do that with chondros. They're hard, harder than many other species, but, and that kind of stabilizes things a little bit, right? So you have that working in the favor of, overproduction. But my wrap up question for you, real simple. If you could, you were boiled down to one locality animal, I'm curious, like, what's the cream of the crop, animal that you'd keep?
Oh, that's actually really hard for me. I would have years ago, it would have been easy. I would have said a roo, no question. But But some of the poker animals, man, that's tough. It'd be real hard to pick between the two. I'd still probably go Aru, but I've got some polkers that I'd be sad to not have.
Yeah. I'm excited for you to push that project. I know in like 20 years when you let your first one go, I'll be right there ready.
I'll be selling poker in probably not this year, but maybe 25.
Okay.
The ones I got now once I know what they're going to look like, I'll start selling.
Ryan, man, if I find out that people are like, hey, yeah, I just got this from Ryan, I'll be like, you did what? like the moment I
am horrible at remembering. I get a lot of inquiries, and so I don't have a list or anything. So the best way is just stay in touch.
Listen, man, I'll stay in touch, and it'll be 2 words. It'll be, we ready? Like, and I'll reach out every couple months. Just
I'm
2
definitely
words.
The squeaky wheel gets the oil kind of guy. So.
Ryan, man, it was a pleasure having you on. Finally getting to talk to you face to face, but yeah, man, I'm trying to think of anything else to wrap up with you, but no, I think we're good. If you don't mind, do you have a Facebook page? Do you have anywhere on social media where people can take a look? If you do, let them know where.
Yeah, I've got. You can look me up just personally on Ryan Young. You can look me up molecularreptile on both Instagram and Facebook. I have an old school website, I believe, still. So I'm easy. If you Google me, you probably find my phone number in 10 minutes. So I'm pretty easy to get a hold of if you want to.
Hashtag make yellows great again.
Right.
I mean, listen, I love my reds, man. My whole thing with taking up for the yellows is I don't necessarily think one's better than the other. It's just a shame to me that they seem to be treated as less than.
Right. All right, man.
Well
Ryan, it was a pleasure having you. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we're looking forward for this episode dropping and getting some of this information out there. And again, just thank you for your time.
Nice, man. Appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely.
Thanks for coming on, brother.
Yep. Take care.
See you, man. All right, Chuck. I probably could have talked to him for another hour, but I know we're getting late over here. Trying to wrap up quickly because it's late, man. We got to find better times to record. But guys,
it's 1 o'clock here in the morning.
For those of you listening to episode 2 of the Chondro Lounge, just want to say thank you for sticking along. Again, the Chondro Lounge is part of the Reptile Lounge Network. And if you are interested in hearing other content of the Reptile Lounge Network, as of right now, we have the Boutique Lounge as well. That's on the same YouTube channel. So the Reptile Lounge Network on YouTube. And you can find us on Instagram as well. And just about any audio platform that's out there. Hope you guys enjoyed listening. And Chuck, you got anything else before we wrap up?
No, thanks for joining us.
All right. See everyone. Thank you so much. And we will see you in a couple weeks on another episode of the Chondro Lounge.